Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. We have Pastor Jeremy on from Memphis, Tennessee. He's got a great church, he's a great leader, and we're talking about dealing with difficult people. It is a great conversation. I loved being able to hang out with him and talk a little bit about this. Before we jump into it, I want to remind you always to visit churchboom.org. There is so much going on that we have there for you. Our Church Boom network, I think everybody should belong to a network. Church Boom University, ongoing education, Church Boom certification, where you could become a coach. So just a lot to check out at churchboom.org. But check that out when you get a chance. But let's jump into the conversation with Pastor Jeremy as we talk about dealing with difficult people. Let's jump into it, man. How can I serve you today?
No, thank you so much for your time, Pastor Chris. I really do appreciate it. And so you've offered this conversation many times. We just get to put it on camera now. So
yeah,
I'm very
absolutely.
thankful for it.
Yeah.
One of my first questions is, as a church is growing and you're at 2 services, what are some preliminary things that you should start positioning your church to start doing as you're maybe praying through a 3rd service? Like, what are some preliminary things that you're looking at that you're like, here's some things that you should start lining up?
Yeah, so you're talking, Jeremy, about going from 2 to 3 services, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, well, one thing that I always say is I'm not a big fan of starting another service. I'm a bigger fan of planting another service or launching another service. I encourage people to treat it almost like a mini church plant, because I think it's a great time to grow. There's a lot of momentum that can come out of adding another service. Outreach Magazine says it's one of the top 3 reasons why churches grow. So if you got a great wave, you don't want to miss the wave. And
Right.
So I always encourage, don't just start it and say, okay, in 2 weeks, we're going to have 3 services. I am a way bigger fan of backing up. If this was the start date, backing up, not 2 weeks, but backing up maybe 8 weeks and say, hey, we're going to be starting a 2nd service or a 3rd service or whatever it is. And here's some of the service times. Which one would you most likely attend? This gives you a chance to balance it out because you don't want to, you want to make sure it's somewhat best balance as you can get. The other thing you can do is create a mini database from those that sign up for the different service times. And you can communicate with them 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, all the way up to, hey, service 1, hey, service 2, hey, service 3, we're excited. You can communicate with them on the database. You can do quick emails to them. You can do quick videos with them. But you can create this energy and this momentum around that they're the owners of that 8:30 service or whatever.
Yeah.
They're the owners of the 10 o'clock. They're the owners of the 11:30 service. And it can create that. It's so much better to do that than just say, starting in 2 weeks, and then wake up on Sunday and go, wondering who's going to show up. I just think you miss a lot of opportunity for momentum there. So that's my thought is just to plan it or launch it rather than start it. I think there's other things we could talk about, but creating that mini database, communicating to them, going out about 8 weeks, I think that's always the best thing to do.
That's great. That's great. How do you, so with 3 services, right? I guess this is a natural next question is, how do you incentivize volunteers to consistently serve when you can't do so financially?
Yeah. And that give them Bitcoin. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. You don't know what's happening.
Hey,
no, I'm just
right?
I'm playing. I'm totally playing. But man, one thing that I always say is that no one wants to work for free. Everybody wants to get paid, and it's kind of like if I painted houses for a living and, I own this company, whatever, and then I hire you and you work for me. You're supposed to get paid every Friday. So you work with me on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday comes around. I'm like, oh, man, I left my checkbook at the office to pay you, or whatever. I don't know, whatever. And then you're like, okay. And then the next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Oh, man, second week. Sorry, man, I'll get it to you. I'll drop it by your house. And then a couple days go by and I don't. You're not going to do that for a long time. I mean, 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe, and then you're done because you want to get paid. Now, let's move that over to volunteers. They want to get paid, but we don't pay volunteers with finances. We pay them with fruit. And you have to realize that the way that you keep volunteers moving forward and excited and their energy is up is because they're getting paid, not by finances, but by fruit. So what is that fruit? It's, hey man, how's your church? Not church. Here at the church where we've seen this many people come to Christ, or we've seen this baptism, or we've seen, this testimony happen, whatever. They got to hear those stories. And I think as pastors, we hear them all the time, and we're somehow under the assumption that they're either hearing them or they're thinking about what we think about Monday through Saturday, which they're not. We all think that we're on their mind. We're the last thing on their mind, until Saturday night going, what shirt am I going to wear tomorrow? Then they think about us. But you got to figure out, okay, if they're not in this world, they're not hearing the stories, they're not getting the emails, whatever, then we have to figure out a cadence, a regular rhythm. How do we communicate to make sure that they realize everything they're doing is producing fruit? Look how many people come to Christ. Look what God's doing. Look this person that got healed. Look at this outreach that happened. Look at this, whatever happened with the kids ministry, whatever. But look at all this stuff that's happening, and you're part of it. Figuring out the regular rhythm, one, obviously you can do that in a huddle. You do it in a huddle on Sunday morning. But you can also do, just a quick idea here for you, Jeremy, you could also do that midweek to all your volunteers. If there's a way for you to say, if there's a way on Slack, or if there's a way on, Basecamp, or however you do it. But think about it. I got my phone right here. If you just did first of all, I got my phone right here, and I want to point out my granddaughter. But
adorable,
one
adorable.
of them. But if you go like this, if you hey, it's Wednesday, midweek Wednesday, or whatever you want to call it. It's Pastor Jeremy, and man, I just want to let you know, just real quick, I read this email this week, and this person, his life turned around, and all this other stuff. And man, you guys are awesome. Thanks for the way you serve. You guys are amazing. That's the midweek update. We'll see you Sunday. Just something where you are, feeding that vision. What does the scripture teaches us? It teaches us people fail for a lack of vision, and actually it says people fail for a lack of vision, and one of the words in that translation is actually they wander around aimlessly. So, people without vision, people perish. That word perish isn't perish as perish in hell. It's actually, there's a translation that says wander around aimlessly. Without vision, the people translated wander around aimlessly.
Right.
And wander around aimlessly is like, what are we doing here? Why are we working here? What's the point of this? That's wandering around aimlessly, because I'm like, why are we here?
Right.
Aimlessly to me is, I don't know what we're doing here. Or I guess I know what we're doing, but what's the point? Our job as leaders is to pay them with fruit, not finances. And as a volunteer, and say, okay, how do I maybe once or twice a week give a quick little update, maybe on Sunday and then on Wednesday, something, whatever works for you. Don't always, and also I'd encourage you, don't always be the person giving the report. In the huddle, you might have someone in the huddle that has a great story. Don't tell the story. Just say, hey, could you share that story in 90 seconds or less in the huddle this Sunday morning? Or Maybe they do it on video. Maybe you just grab a video and they're there in your office and you're like, hey, I got so-and-so with me. Tell us in 60 seconds or less what God has done in your life. And you're kind of holding it up, and just something like that kind of allows that constant vision to be cast to why they're doing it. Otherwise, they'll perish, which of course means wander around aimlessly.
That's really good. That's solid. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's how you keep them motivated, man. You got to keep,
I've been writing
the
notes.
wins. Well, no, that's good. You got to keep the wins in front of them, man.
Yeah,
they're not gonna, they're not going to make it otherwise, And,
to shift gears a little bit, I guess this is more of like church discipline. How do you, I know we've talked about in the past, like accidental values in the church. And so how do you deal with accidental values, and how do you also like hold people accountable without the fear of losing them or the fear of like pushing them away?
Holding people accountable without the fear of losing them or pushing them away.
Or let's say that person is the reason why the accidental value exists in the church.
Well, now we got a couple different questions, but we can break it down. We got some time. No, we got time. So let's talk about this. Let's dialogue a little bit. So you're talking about what happens if on that last part, and to make sure I hit both parts. But let's talk about the last part first. Is the accidental values? You're saying what happens if you have a team member that is creating the accidental value. And then if I talk to them, I might lose them and the 19 people they're related to, or something like that.
Right.
Does that sound familiar?
It sounds like you've been through this situation before.
Exactly. It's like, here they go. They're going to get upset. Well, I got several things to say about that. First, I always like to back up from the problem and talk about preventative maintenance. So moving forward, let's put it aside for a moment. Moving forward, and this doesn't work every time. It's not perfect or anything. But if you remember in the values that we've talked about, there's core values, accidental values, and aspirational values. The core values are who you are no matter what. It's the things that you are as a leader, Jeremy, no matter what. You cannot not be that. It's not core. Always remember, core values are discovered, not declared. Core values are discovered. They're not declared. You don't just say a core value. We're a church that, we're a staff that works as a team. You're making a declaration. You have to discover what's the core value in you.
That's good.
The thing that is just like, bro, let me tell you, man, I work hard and I expect other people to work hard. Core value. Man, I want to do church and staff and leadership as a team. I want us to vacation together, I want us to hang out together. That's a value. You don't declare it like that's aspirational values. We're going to be a church of generosity. We're going to be a Bible-centered church. You're declaring something. You're not that. The whole church isn't generous, so you're not that. That's declaring.
That's good.
You are discovering. Look inside and say, okay, what are my core values as a leader? Now, the reason I say that is because when you get staff members or future key leaders, I'm not talking about every volunteer under the sun because that would be impossible, but excuse me, key leaders, key leaders, board members, staff members, you want them to have and share somewhat of those same core values that were discovered in you. The things that the 4 or 5 things is like, yeah, that's Jeremy. That is Jeremy. Like, he is all about this. He's all about that. And boy, and sometimes the way you discover the core values is not what you're all about. Sometimes it's what you're all against.
That's good.
Let me tell you what really ticks me off. Okay, so the opposite of that is your core value.
Yeah. Pay attention.
Oh, let me tell you, for me, if someone doesn't respond to a text or an email, that drives me nuts. And I'm like, okay, I just hate that guy. So, okay, flip to the other side. So I value communication. I value on-time communication very much. Okay, so you flip.
Whoever's watching, if you have his number, he will respond.
He will respond, and he will respond quickly. I do. I'm sure I mess up every now and then, but it's pretty rare because I am like, nah, when it comes to. So let's think about the core values for a moment, Jeremy. Okay, let's say communication is a core value of mine. If I bring someone on my team, a staff member, and they don't value the same thing as communication, that's going to be a serious problem because I'm going to get annoyed. They're going to think it's no big deal. Hey, the other guy who works for it didn't care, or whatever it is. And so I have to discover what's the core value for me. Well, it might be communication. It might be risk-taking. It might be, hey, being relevant. It might be outreach-minded. I tell you, one of them I've shared before is I had one of my former guys work with me, my coach. I've been getting coached for over 10 years, executive coaching, and he said, one of your core values that you don't realize is sarcasm and humor. And I'm like, what? And he goes, if someone on your team can't handle sarcasm and humor, it bothers you. And that starts ruining the relationship. I'm like, that is so true. We always think it's some spiritual, cool leadership thing. It's like, no, it's who you are. That just like, man, when people are not that, it's like, I don't know if I want to run with them. So I say all that. Again, those are discovered. Aspirational values are declared. Like, oh, we're going to be a church of generosity. That's more for the church. Now, the reason I say all that is back to the preventative maintenance. Moving forward, always remember in your head, I gotta know what my 3, 4, 5, no more than 5. I like it better around 3 or 4. What are the top 3 or 4 things like, that's Jeremy. Now, knowing that, I'm not going to hire anybody that doesn't share those kind of values. I'm not going to put anybody in a key leadership influential position that doesn't share those values, because if I do, the relationship's doomed, and it's a matter of time before I want them to get off the bus or find a different seat on the bus. So knowing that, if you could step back and figure that out over the next couple of weeks and start saying, okay, I've discovered these, man, it will radically determine the next people you bring into leadership.
So what you're talking about is 2 separate things, right? There should be one for yourself personally, like these are my personal core values or convictions, right? Mm-hmm. And then there should be one for the church or the organization.
Church, yes.
Or should they be the same thing?
No, they're different. Here's aspirational values. Aspirational values are the things that all of us put on our walls in our church. We are a church of generosity. We are a Bible-centered church. We serve others, whatever. Those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 statements everybody has hanging on some wall or somewhere in the hallway or something. Those are what we want the church to become. They're aspirational. People say, well, those are our values. I'm like, no, they're your aspirational values. Not everybody in your church is generous. Not everybody in church is Bible-centered. We're all just kind of working towards that. Like, not everybody's there. We're all working towards that. The core values are more about you and about that key leadership. They're not things you put on a wall. They're things that your staff knows and you know. Okay, so now it's time to hire a children's pastor, or it's time to put someone in a key leadership position. And you know your 3 or 4 values. So you interview them, you talk to them, you talk to a couple staff members, but you got to run them through mentally. You got to run them through those 3 or 4 values. That's got to be part of your vetting process. Because if you don't run them through those 3 or 4 values, then they're going to join the team, not the aspirational ones, the core ones. They're going to join your team, and you're going to be thinking, this is driving me nuts. This is bothering me. I don't like this. So, they got to have character, and they got to be able to do the job, and, and all that chemistry with the team. I get all that, and that's all important. But one more thing you want to add into that before you bring on a leader is you want to make sure, do they pass these core value tests? Because if they don't, they may check the other boxes, but if they don't check those boxes, the relationship will be doomed.
That's good.
So that's preventative maintenance. Now to the question, what do I do when I have someone on my team? That will help you to not get people on your team that are like that. Does that make sense? You get people that are like this, they're not going to be they're less likely to create accidental values.
I just want to be clear too. So it's not your entire volunteer team, right? You're just talking about like your executive team, those closest to you.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you can't declare that for all the volunteers. Like you won't have any volunteers. But we're talking about your board, definitely your staff. I would say staff number one and key leaders, not just, oh, he kind of oversees the ushers. Like, man, this guy we don't pay him, but man, he's involved. I mean, he is intense. It's the people that are going to be closest to you. They have to share those values. And as your church grows and we work together and your church gets to X amount and now you got 10 more staff members, it's like those 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 staff members, they have to share those values. If they don't, you're going to get annoyed and the relationship's going to get doomed. It is. So that's what you got to keep it. It's really just for the high level leaders, paid staff or even unpaid staff. That's really the primary focus. Does that help on that part of it?
No, that's great. Yeah, that's great.
You'll discover those. So I want to encourage you seriously for the next couple of weeks to start thinking, what are my 2, 3, 4, probably 3 or 4 things? Then ask other people, what do you think I value the most? What do you think? Tell me what you think I'm really like. Tell me what you think really bothers me in leadership. And you're not telling them, don't bait it out there. Just ask them. And you're looking, they might say it differently, but you're looking for common threads and realize like, wow, you're right. Maybe you came up with 2 or 3, and then you start listening to everybody else, and you're like, okay, whoa, I didn't even think about that one. Yeah, I guess you're right. Now you start to state those and get an understanding of those, and then you just know that we don't bring people on the team at this level unless they share in these values, because otherwise this won't work.
It's really good. That's really good.
That is preventative maintenance. Now to the person that you have on a team that creates accidental values.
Right. Yeah.
There is no other way to do it but by having the tough conversation. One thing I always say to people is that you may be one tough conversation away from a breakthrough. And you can never, Jeremy, let the threat of what they give financially or who they know or who they're related to, or you can never let the threat of that get in your way, because the longer you wait, most likely the worse it'll get. I always say, it's like, I don't want to deal with the conflict now. Pay now or pay later. But if you pay later, you'll always pay more.
Yeah.
So don't put it off.
That's good.
And when you have those difficult conversations, like with an accidental value person, and you got that fear of, you want to start with the best assumption. So you might, I'll do things like this. Let's pretend, role play a little bit. I'll say, Jeremy, you're a staff member of mine, and I'll bring you in and say, hey, I've been kind of noticing this has been happening, and I've been kind of hearing it, and I'm kind of seeing it and watching it, and I was just wondering if you could speak into that for me. One of the most powerful ways to deal with a conflictive conversation is to immediately ask them, can you speak into this? Here's what I've been feeling. Here's what I've been noticing. I kind of watched you in staff meeting. I overheard you say this, and I don't know what's happening in your heart and your life and your mind, but I was wondering if you could speak into that for me.
Yeah, that's
It
good.
is gold. Everybody comes in going, here's the 9 things that have been annoying me. Dude, that person is most likely immediately on the defense.
Yeah,
But if you just say, here's a few things I've noticed. I was wondering, Jeremy, if you can speak into it. Now, here's the gold part. Not every time, but I'd say about 80% of the time, they'll spill for about 3 or 4 minutes. Well, this happened, that happened, and I really got annoyed. And, and I know about me being annoyed probably caused me to have a bad attitude, but let me tell you why. They talk for 5 minutes. After you say, can you speak into that? All gently. They ramble for 5 minutes. They say the word bad attitude, and then you go, okay, about 3 minutes ago, you said this statement, and you had that phrase bad attitude. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? All you're doing now is you're addressing what they've admitted. And then it starts, it's totally different. Totally different. You're not coming in going, I've noticed this. You're getting them to say it. And once they say it, now you're in a conversation only resolving what they admitted to be the problem. Completely changes the tone of the conversation.
That's really good.
Yeah. So
good.
that should help with the conflict part of it as well. So anything else, man?
Man, I guess one more. what are some practical ways? Because I know when we last talked, we talked about the difference between engagement and attendance.
Hmm.
And so, what are some ways that because you said you did with a team of people, like, hey, we want to get 25 people engaged over the next 90 days. Like, can you just walk me through that process of what you did and how you achieved that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan. I've talked about it several times here on the podcast, and I'm telling you, I am a big fan of engagement over attendance.
Yeah.
A couple of reasons why. I think one is it's just a funny thing when you think about sitting in front of your staff and say, "We're going to grow by 200 people by the end of the year," and I always ask the question to pastors like, "What do you think the staff's actually going to do about that?" I mean, you can't hold them accountable to it. So there's no
Right.
accountability. So no one's held accountable for it. And what are they going to do? Maybe they'll pray about it. That's great. Maybe they'll invite a friend or two. Okay. But really, what are they going to do? So let's just
Yeah.
say, and the truth is, Jeremy, as I always share, is that the attendance is the result. That's the result we're
Hmm.
looking for. But what we
Yeah.
should be focusing on is the activity.
That's
Engagement
good.
is the activity. Attendance is the result. Everybody's focusing on the result. I'm like, stop focusing on the result. That's like, when you ever go to the gym, we all do it, man. We go to the gym, we pump iron, and we kind of look in the mirror just to kind of, let me see if my biceps. And you see guys look in the mirror and they kind of do this thing. If a guy stands there for an hour in the mirror and then goes home, comes back the next day, stands there for an hour in the mirror, and then goes home, it's like, nothing's going to change, buddy, because
Right.
you're focused on a result. You can take away all the mirrors in the gym and
Yeah.
focus on the activity. The activity will get you the result. You work out,
Yeah.
you'll get a result. It's not rocket science. It's just there's an activity. Now to the church, there's an activity. So staff, we're going to focus on activity. So let me tell you what we're going to do. We're gonna go on what's called a 90-day run, and for the next 90 days, our goal is to get 30 people engaged in ministry. So you look at your staff and go, look, you get five, you get five, you get five. Okay, that five, whatever, that equals 30. And then you keep track of it every week in staff meeting. All right, who did you guys talk to? Who did you get plugged in? Who did you get engaged? Okay, now you're on week 6. You're halfway through. 12 weeks makes 90 days. You're 6 weeks through. You're like, okay, man, we're at 18. We're over halfway there, and we're on our way. Or whoa, we're at 12. Come on, guys, we gotta. And then when that 90 days is up, you might take a week or two, and then you run it again, and you
Yeah.
don't
What do
stop.
you do? What do you do with the person who is I guess I don't love this word, but would be an underperformer, or who it's like, hey, I'm challenging all you guys, and they're just like, I'm trying, but I'm just not getting it, and you could see like the wind in their sails begin to
Right.
diminish.
Well, and I was looking at something real quick on my phone there. I just want to make sure my next podcast, I'm doing another one with someone. I want to make sure I didn't run over, but we got time. So you're talking about if someone is not kind of living up to that, or kind of being able to. Okay, so couple things. First, most often, an introvert will blame their introvert personality on it and say, if I can't do
Yeah.
it, I'm not outgoing or whatever. Okay, well, I say, all right, I understand you're introvert. I know that God made you that way, but I'm sorry, it still needs to happen. They might say, oh, it's really hard for me. Okay, what's the most outgoing people you have on your team? Oh, Tom and Jessica, they're crazy. Okay, pull Tom and Jessica aside and say, look, we're going to start growing our team and other people's teams, and I need your help. We're going to do 5 every 90 days. Could you help me recruit? Now you got 3 people recruiting, not just you. Like,
Yeah.
if Tom and Jessica are outgoing, it'd be like you and I are very outgoing. If the introvert asked us, and we're an usher on the team, we're like, yeah, how many you need? 5? I'll have that by the end of the day. It's no big deal
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you're an introvert. I get it. God made you that way. There's nothing to blame for that. There's nothing wrong about that. But that doesn't give you an excuse not to do it. So sometimes
Right.
they'll have an excuse. So what I tell pastors is, I'm like, if you have someone on your team that's like that, help them the best as you can. Hey, if you're an introvert, here's an idea for you. If they don't know how, they're like, man, I don't know how to recruit. Okay, Walk them through role play. You know, you walk, okay, just tell them like, hey, man, walk up to someone that you think is somewhat new at the church and say, hey, what's your name, man? You've been coming here for like 2 months now. Oh, man, what's your name? Oh, my name's Jacob and Stephanie. Oh, wow, great. Nice to meet you. You know, Jacob and Stephanie, I've seen you around here a few times. You've always got the biggest smiles on your faces. You guys are just like the good-looking couple. Everybody smiles at you. You know, I was just thinking that maybe God could use that amazing smile here at this church. And I was wondering if I could call you this week to talk about that. People don't say no to that kind of statement. And this is recruiting 101. Compliment the person and then take what you complimented them about and show them quickly how it could be used for something cool at the church. I was just, you know, hey, you smile big, you got the biggest smiles, you got the whitest teeth in the whole church, look at you. You know, they kind of laugh every time, and then you're like, I was wondering, man, if I could call you this week and kind of talk to you a little bit about how I think God could use that amazing smile of yours. People don't go, no, I do not want God using my amazing smile. Like, people don't do that. Like, right. Well, maybe once in a while. And then, so you're teaching, hey, introvert, go get a couple people on your team. Okay, that may solve it. Okay, let me tell you about recruiting. Compliment people. And then the third thing I would say is they have to start having a paradigm shift, because most people, your associate pastor, your children's pastor, your worship pastor, they're going to do the same exact thing they do every single Sunday. They're going to show up at X amount time, whatever time that is, put certain signs out, roll out the computer, get the check-in system ready for the children. They're going to put out music sheets they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Everybody does the same thing. Okay, you got to train your team. Hey, from now on, walking away with 1 to 2 phone numbers in your pocket, that's got to be added to your list. It's just part of what we do. It's part of what we do, man. And
that's good.
Once they start doing it, by the time you do a second or third 90-day run, they got it. And the thing that I always tell people is, back to the activity and the result. Let's say you did 30 every 90 days. Well, there's 4 90 days in a year, 30, 60, 90, 120. How can you add 120 new volunteers, but the church doesn't grow? Like, it's not even mathematically possible. You grow 2 people for every 1 new person to get involved in ministry. So I tell people, you want to grow your church? Get a lot of people engaged in the life of the church. Watch what happens. People tend to support whatever they create. They feel more like owners. And a person is 500 times more likely to stay in a church once they get engaged. You're going to close the back door and grow the church. I was working with a church out in where was they at? I think in Texas or New Mexico or somewhere. And I remember a couple of years back, and I'm like, they went on like 40 a year, 40 every 90 days. They're a church about 500. Wow. 40, wow. 80, 120, 160. Dude, by the time we were in the 18th month, that church of 500 was pushing between 950 and 1,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
I just said, focus on the activity. It will get you the result. Get your team to do that, man. I'm telling you, it'll work. You got to be consistent with it. Anyway, hey, man, I got to jump on the next one. But, dude, great talking with you, man.
Great talking to you, man.
Yeah, appreciate your heart and your spirit. You always have an amazing heart, and you always have an amazing attitude towards everything. You're awesome. So, all right, buddy.
Thank you for your time.
We'll talk soon, man. Have a good day, bud.
See ya.
All right, bye-bye. Wow, that was an amazing conversation with Pastor Jeremy. Sure do love his heart and love the subject that we talked about today. And before we close off, just want to remind you to check out churchboom.org. There are tons of resources there for you to continue to grow and develop as a leader. I always say speed of the leader, speed of the team. So we've always got to be leading out in front. We'll see you next time on the next podcast, Fly on the Wall.